Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your no Shorty. Today we're going to look at the brand new Supergirl one by Seth Campbell and Tamara Bonvillain. Bonvillain? I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. I do apologise. This one I was interested in to read for a few reasons. Namely, one of the best comics I've read in recent years has been the last Tom King and Bill Everly Supergirl. And secondly, I kind of find the character an interesting look at how people in the comic books industry approach writing femme characters and how they're presented in comic books. And also, I kind of like the idea of Seth Campbell being the person to write this, for a few reasons. And the first one I want to deal with is the fact that if you're expecting something like the Tom King Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, maybe this isn't for you, and I don't mean that as a negative thing. I think very early on, they set their stall, this is a far different creature, and I think that's a good thing, because it's a high bar. I mean, that comic book was amazing. It's been inspiration for a movie. Damn near won some Eisner. In fact, I think it may have won one for something, but it was a huge book when it came out, and it still is talked about now and has a hardback edition. So doing something that needs to exist in that space, I think the right thing to do is kind of set your own standards, and they do that very quickly, very early on. I opened up, the first thing that hit me was the colouring. It's fantastic. Tamara is brilliant at what she does. In this particular case, what we get is something just really both bold, full of life, kind of light, effervescent even, and the art style, so Campbell being the artist and the writer on this one, absolutely matches it completely. And just flicking through it before I even started reading, that sense of lightness, of fun, was there throughout, and I think that is a good thing to have. Don't get me wrong, I quite like intense storytelling. I like stuff where I get to talk about politics and class and feminist representation, all manner of things that I find interesting that art does. In this particular case, they've gone for something which is a little bit more family friendly, a little bit more light, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Some people might, they might be just like, well, this isn't aimed at me, this is a different perspective, that's what I'm looking for, and that's fine. But you should read those kind of things. You should engage with art that represents stuff that's different to you. It's not necessarily just a good thing even, it's a great thing, an essential thing. You should be engaging with more than just your own personal comfort zone or social situation. In this particular case, that lightness makes it available to everyone. It is family friendly, it is fun, it is easy to read, but not necessarily childish. Now, I do have one mild criticism which kind of leans into what I'm saying here, because as people who've been watching these for a while will know, I really enjoy a good crime noir internal monologue, box out text going through what's going on in the main character's mind. This one, there is internal monologue, but it's done through thought bubble instead, which changes the feel of it. It feels more like a conversation the individual's having with themselves, rather than just a narration of what's going on. That is a small change, but it's one that I found myself, I prefer the box out narration. It feels a little bit close to what I want from an internal monologue. In this particular case, it's used to do an awful lot of exposition, and I do feel like it's necessary if you're approaching brand new readers, and that's fine. That is something which it makes it easy for them to jump on. But my personal favourite way of doing this is through storytelling rather than telling. And I'm not saying it's an impossible thing to do well. This does a pretty good job of it, and it actually maintains the kind of light storytelling that we're going for. But it's just not something which I personally look for in a writing style. But okay, it worked. Intentionality was there. They were trying to tell this kind of story in a way which would be easily accessible to as many people as possible, and by having the main character explain a lot of things as it's going along, there's no second guessing, everything is just laid out there on Front Street. Now, there is actually some quite deep story going on, and I feel like that's kind of another reason why they would have kept it a little bit light in how they're doing exposition, because in ways that probably won't be surprising to some people, the issue of identity is a main factor in most of the storytelling going on here. Very early on, we get an almost common look at Kara's identity issues in the fact that she's come to a planet where she's supposed to go for a young cousin, and he's a full-grown man and the world's greatest superhero, and she's trying to find her own place in that. And that's expanded on further throughout the story in a variety of interesting ways. I'm not going to spoil the actual story here, but if you keep that in mind, that's a good thing. And I would think at this point, if the kind of horrible people who exist on the internet ever watch my videos, thankfully they don't seem to have found me yet, they're probably going to be like, oh, well, of course, it's a trans femme writer, she's going to make this all about identity politics, she's almost certainly going to try to rewrite it so there'll be a trans character where there wasn't before, maybe even Supergirl's going to be trans. And I've got two things to say to that. First off, no, stop, don't do that. Secondly, this is her lived experience dealing with matters of identity, and she probably has more things saying it than most people, certainly more than I would. And again, going back to my earlier point, you should be listening to voices different to your own. They should be telling you stories about their experience. And in case you didn't know this, in case this is a massive surprise for those terrible people who might have discovered my video by accident, pretty much every writer in the world, every creative person puts their own experience into the art in some way. People writing about elves and goblins do it. Hard sci-fi writers do it. Everyone does it because that is the best way to write stories, and it gives a perspective which people may be lacking. And I think it does a good job. Yet it is kind of light, it is kind of airy, it is fun, there's more hijinks than absolute danger. But I think that all goes well towards making a comic which is easy for everyone to read and tells a story I think more people should be aware of. That's it for me for now, though. Until I see you all again, look after yourselves, everyone. Stay safe. Bye!